Hello, everyone. As you may know, I'm Mariangela Pellegrini, so I'm the Educational and Patient Program Manager for the ERN-EuroBloodNet, so the European Reference Network on Rare Haematological Disease. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of all the ERN to the first session of this educational program targeting patients that is named ENROL Webinars for Patients, and that is in the frame of ENROL, the European Rare Blood Disorder Platform. I'm really happy to announce that this program has been co-designated, of course, by the ENROL consortium, which includes also the ePAGs, so the patients group of the ERN-EuroBloodNet and EURORDIS, as they are part of the ENROL Steering Committee. And this program consists of 3 webinars. So today we will have the first lecture. Those webinars are focused on different aspects of the European Registry on Rare Haematological Disorders. So we will have today a lecture of ENROL networking on European Registry in Rare Haematological Disorder. So we will see a general overview of this platform, the structuration, the policy, how the platform support research in the second webinar, which is the title, How ENROL Support Clinical Research. I haven't announced yet the first speakers because I will introduce them afterwards, but for the second webinar, they are here today with us. So we have the Professor Beatrice Gulbis as speaker. She's the co-coordinator of the ERN-EuroBloodNet, and our ePAG, María she's as a patient representative affiliated to PNH Support and PNH Global Alliance. Because you may know that at EuroBloodNet, every webinar that targets patients or patients organization are performed are provided by a duo of an expert speaker, physician or healthcare professional, and a patient representative. And then we will have the third session will be on PROMs and PREMs in ENROL. The speaker will be myself, and with me, the ePAG, Jacqueline Dubois from MDS Alliance and Connaître et Combattre les Myelodysplasies. So today, as said, we are going to talk about networking on European Registry in Rare Haematological Disorder. The duo of today is María del Mar Mañú Pereira. She is head of Rare Anemia Disorder Research Laboratory in Translation Research Group on Cancer and Blood Disorder at Vall Research Institute in Barcelona, in Spain. She's also the scientific director of DRN, and she is also part of the work package 3 of the ERICA project based in focalized on PROMs, and Loris Brunetta, our ePAG for rare blood defects. He's the founding member of the Comitato Ligure Giovani Thalassaemici. He's also one of the founding member of the Thalassaemia International Federation. He's had been elected by EURORDIS as ePAG in 2016, and we are really happy to have both of them with us today.
Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. As Mariangela already introduced, there will be 3 webinars. The first one will be given by myself. I'm coordinator of ENROL, and the nice presentation you already did, Mariangela. And it's my pleasure to share this webinar with Loris Brunetta. So we'll try to give an overview on why we are working on this ENROL registry, what we say the challenge of the fragmentation of patients' data. So we're talking about rare diseases, so we need to pull the data and how we are doing this at the European level. So the questions to be addressed are data fragmentation, what is the problem of this data fragmentation, the impact, the European Union context of patient registries, the meaning of FAIR, because this is a key concept that we probably hear in many contexts, but really to understand what is behind these 4 letters. And then finally, the enroll strategy and how we really are working with other registries to improve access to patients' data on rare hematological disorders. So this was the questions that I mentioned. And then we start with the challenge of data fragmentation, and Loris will explain.
Okay, you can. So initially, rare diseases are by definition those with low number of patients, and generally they are quite scattered across Europe. Therefore, patients' data are fragmented, and it is difficult to achieve a reliable overview of the magnitude of the problem. So. And this is why eventually the European Commission has funded and implemented the establishment of the European reference networks. So far, the biggest effort done by the Europe to meet rare disease patients' needs. These networks seek to give an answer to the patients that have been waiting since many years to be timely diagnosed or correctly diagnosed, to have treatments, to participate in clinical trials, and even to receive care in different countries if this is not available where the patients live. In the slide is depicted why data fragmentation is a problem. This is a sort of vicious circle that impacts on everyday life of patients, because if there is a scattered knowledge and expertise, it's difficult to diagnose a disease. If there is scarce or fragmented or no structured data, there is lack of cohort of patients, therefore lack of basic research because it's difficult to implement clinical trials. And without treatment, it's difficult, of course, to have guidelines that address the problems of patients. And can I have the next slide, please, Ma? Yeah, but this circle can be broken thanks to the initiative of providing a European rare disease platform. Therefore, the European Commission is founding the creation of this platform for gathering patients' data. This is good to overcome some problems that, as we can see in few minutes, during the presentation, we realized that the implementation of a centralized system is not so easy to achieve, and probably generates another kind of problems, but it's definitely much important for the patient's life. I leave now the floor again to Maria in order to explain the European Commission strategies for patients' registries. Maria, please, can you continue?
Thank you, Loris. So what we are trying to do for trying to solve all these problems that Loris has mentioned, so there is a strategy at the European Union level for rare diseases, not only for hematological diseases, for all rare diseases. And the European Commission released a central platform that is the EU Rare Diseases platform. And this platform is not really a registry of patients, but they are giving some recommendations and some tools for improving our work as implementing real registries on rare diseases. So one of the things that the European Commission released is a first list of some elements that should be included in any patient registry. Element means, for instance, the date of birth, the diagnosis of the disease. So some key elements that, of course, any rare disease need to register in order to understand how many patients are in the different countries and over the time. And the second tool was the pseudonymization tool. And this is very important because now we'll explain what is the use of this tool, but this tool is called SPIDER, and it is GDPR compliant. What does it mean? GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. It is at the European level, and the GDPR defines what is personal data. And in the definition, we see that personal data means any data that contain identifiers that make possible to find out who is the person. So any data that, with this data, you are at the end able to find the person, this is personal data. Also, if it includes codes or pseudonyms, or if even there are no codes, now we'll see. But this is still personal data if at the end you can re-identify the person. And then for sharing the GDPR, the regulation also says that for sharing any personal data, you need to put some safeguards, you need a legal basis, and normally this legal basis is obtained through the informed consent from the patient. But one first message today is that it's not the only way. So normally it's through the informed consent, but it's not the only way to have the legal basis for sharing the data. But still, even if you have the informed consent, we have to put in place some safeguards. And one of these safeguards is this pseudonymization tool. So where this pseudonymization tool is placed. So here you can see that you have, I don't know if I can, yeah. Can you see the slides still?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay. I wanted to add this now. Okay, so here you have like all the different stages of what would be personal data. If you look at the example here, what is a direct identifier? Your name, your full name. With, of course, then you know who is the person. The number of the passport, because it's a unique number, or your home address. All these are direct identifiable data. So if you put this data with your clinical data, of course, this is personal data, direct identifiable. What the SPIDER does? The SPIDER is at the level of your hospital, and then your clinician, your physician, will produce a pseudonym. And this pseudonym, that is this code with number of letters, will replace all these direct identifiers. So it will be only share this pseudonym with the clinical data. So it's not so easy now to know who is behind. This is what we call pseudonymous data, and this is what the SPIDER will do. I won't enter into details, but it's GDPR compliant because it's not so easy to understand how the pseudonym is done. It's not that you put the first letter of your name, no, it's not easy to understand. Then if we remove the pseudonym, because for doing some research, we don't know, we really don't need maybe to have the pseudonym, then we are talking about the identified data. And then it's still more difficult because even you don't have the pseudonym that link your data with your name. And then you will be just someone in between others. It is anonymous? Not really. It is what we call the identified data. Because at the end, if you merge this data with other data sets that include your name, it could be at the end possible to re-identify the person depending on the clinical data we share. So it's very difficult. And of course, there are other safeguards to avoid this, but it's not really anonymous data. So it's still under the GDPR and it's considered personal data. Then we do something that we call minimization of the clinical data. And we remove some of the elements, or for instance, instead of sharing your birthday or your age, we only share if you are an adult or a child. Then this makes not very difficult, impossible. In these cases, when we are not able to re-identify the patient, then we are speaking about anonymous data. So this is what SPIDER is doing. This is a tool offered by the European Commission. And then, as we already mentioned, the 24 ERNs for all the different medical conditions are working on their specific areas for implementing all these recommendations and to put together the registries in place for the different areas. In our case, rare hematological conditions, but there are, and our registry is ENROL. It's called ENROL, it's the European Rare Blood Disorders platform, but there are other 23 ENROL-like registries for kidney, for bone, for all the other disorders. So I give Loris to explain how to break the cycle and through the objective of ENROL.
Yes, no, thanks. Yes, this slide shows the key principles of ENROL and its main aim. And so at the end of the day, ENROL has been conceived in the core of the EuroBloodNet as an umbrella for new or already existing registries. Of course, has been done so far a big effort by the coordination team in order to map all the existing registries, and we see in detail later on rare hematological disorders, aiming to avoiding this problem that we call the fragmentation of data by promoting standards for patient registries, particularly for interoperability in line with the European Rare Disease Platform set by the European Commission. The principle is to benefit, to maximize the benefit from the data on this particular area, but it's true for all the 24 ERNs, of course, for all the rare hematological rare diseases in general, with the only restriction needed to guarantee what Mar explained before, the patient's rights and the confidentiality, in agreement with the European regulation for cross-border sharing of personal data. So now we have a platform, so we have the possibility to share and pool the data, to reach critical numbers, to analyze and perform clinical trials, research projects, to create evidence and the generation of knowledge. But it's important, the evidence, because as any patients know very well, the generation of real world data, it's important, very important also for conducting a patient-centered research, and of course, in general, for the better healthcare of rare hematological diseases patients. I think, Ma, it's better for you to go more in detail with the platform.
Thank you, Loris. This is just to present to you the consortium. So ENROL consortium is made up of 4 members of ERN-EuroBloodNet. It's coordinated from University Hospital Vall d'Hebron. Then include also the 2 coordinators of the ERN-EuroBloodNet, coordinator Pierre Frenot in APHP in Saint Louis in Paris, and then the co-coordinator Beatrice Ulvis from Erasmus University Hospital in Brussels, Belgium, and then the developer of the platform that are the team in Cyprus, led by Marina Kleinhorst. And then we have, of course, this is a core initiative of ERN-EuroBloodNet. Since the beginning, we have the EURORDIS as part of the consortium, and the whole initiative is officially endorsed by the European Hematology Association. This is our team now. So I'm really very proud and glad to share with you. We are growing a lot. So we have scientific managers, financial, legal, as you can imagine, is very important, biostatistician, the developers and project managers and the educational manager for patients. And then we have our ePAGs that Loris, if you want to.
Yes, thanks. This is the European Patient Advocates Group, in short, ePAGs, a panel of patients representing all the disease areas that are included in the ERN-EuroBloodNet. And this group is also part of the steering committee of ENROL, as we are going to see in a few minutes. And we have actively participated in defining some rules for the data access, for the informed consent. And all these people covers roles of responsibilities, relevant places in the European organization. It's I represent the Thalassaemia International Federation within the EuroBloodNet, but we have also the oncological side. You know that the ERN-EuroBloodNet is divided into two areas, the oncological and non-oncological, and all the patients are truly representative at high level of this in this panel. I think, María, you can, okay.
Okay, so I'm just, for this first part, we are working together with the 24 registries, as we said before. So there is like a upper level that, of course, I'm not going to explain, but what is important is that we are not alone. We are not doing this just as ENROL, but we are working with the other 23 ENROL-like registries. We are working on three main aims. We are defining what type of data we should gather in each of the registries and in each of the medical areas. We are working a lot on legal and ethics issues, because as you can imagine, and we'll see a bit also from this definition of personal data, there is a lot of legal and ethics issues to be tackled, and also the FAIR principles that we said in the objectives of the webinar, that we want to go more in detail, because the FAIR is now in any registry and any discussion on registries, but we really want to see a bit more in detail what does FAIR principles mean. Probably you know they stand for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But what is behind this? So this is the next section. What does FAIR mean? And Loris already introduced a bit, but for findable, Loris will explain, and accessible, what we are doing.
Okay, thanks, Ma. So yes, following what Ma has explained before, we can introduce now the FAIR principles. And F, as anticipated, stands for findable. This means that once the directory of registries is ready, we need to find the data to include, remembering that the main scope is not to create registries from the scratch. Of course, it's possible, and it is needed when some ultra-rare diseases are not already covered, but to pull data from the already existing registries. As told before, the network has implemented the very important and relevant mapping exercise that has been conducted very actively in the past months. And at the end of the day, we found 235 registries on rare hematological diseases. Can I have the next step? Thank you. And here you can see the different registries piled for group of diseases that recall more or less the subnetworks of EuroBloodNet. We can find registries for red blood cell disorders, for myeloid and lymphoid malignancy, disorders of coagulation, bone marrow failures, and all the areas that are covered by the ERNs. Can I have the next, please? Once we have found data, we need also to make them accessible. Indeed, the second principle of FAIR, the A stands for accessible. Registries of or data collection, because we cannot say that every data collection is a registry. A registry has particular features that need to be and criteria that need to meet. Sometimes we are in front also of a collection of data, but at the end of the day, are important. These collections are important for several reasons: epidemiology, treatments available, etc. Each registry have been set according to different rules. Therefore, the first step to make the data accessible is to have an agreement for data sharing with the manager or the curator of a given registry. In the slide, you can see the geographical distribution. It is important to understand where the registry is based. While some of them, as you can see in this slide, have been established at the international level, some at the national level, some at regional, even at hospital, a single hospital level. So there is a sort of, some have a platform, some other are only on Excel files. And this heterogeneity does not always facilitate accessibility. As you can see in this slide, however, the majority are based nationally and usually in the language of the country where it's based. So, as you can imagine, also implementing this kind of platform means to have concerns and problems to face, to solve problems in order to make the data easily accessible for the needs, of course, of patients, of implementing research, etc. Yeah, to conclude here, okay, thank you, Mar. The main question we need to figure out for our mapping exercise, but now the main question: how can we pull data all together? This is the burning questions, and for answering this, I leave the floor to Mar for explaining the other key principle of FAIR with the solution of our concern about how pulling the data all together.
Then we move to I, interoperable. And then, as Loris was saying, now we need, once that we have an agreement with the curator of the registry. You saw that there are 235 or something like the registries covering hematological disorders in Europe. But then we need to understand, so how we pull the data. So we need to first understand each registry, how has been built. We want at the end to have comparable data at the EU level, because we need to be sure that what we are gathering from the different registries is the same, are defining the same type of data, and we can compare the results, no? And this is crucial for epidemiological and clinical surveillance and for the promotion of the research, basic and clinical research. So probably we have some questions at the European level. We want to know how many patients for each disease in the different countries over time, how the diagnosis is done, if it is delayed, if there are availability of samples for research, the disease severity. Now we want to understand which diseases are more severe or if the severity is different in the different countries, clinical manifestations, outcomes, treatments, how treatments are offered and are given to the patients or are accessible or not, and the possibility to offer to the patients a clinical trial or identify some group of patients that may be asked to participate in our research to advance in the development of treatments and solutions. So, but in order to know all this, we need to define some information that we want to gather. And as we saw, there are already many registries. As Loris explained, we don't want to create all new registries. We want to be based on what exists. But what do you see in this slide, for instance? If we want to know if the patient has anemia, no, this is a common characteristic in hematology. So maybe in each registry, they are asking for anemia in a different way. First thing, already mentioned by Loris, most of the registries, our national registries, are on the national language. So this is probably the first thing we can see on this slide, different languages. Then some registries are asking directly, does the patient have anemia? Yes, no. Maybe others ask the same question, but the answer is severe, moderate, mild, or maybe others are not asking directly for anemia, but for the concentration of hemoglobin. But then you can see that some of them uses one type of unit, and other registries uses another type of units based on the laboratories at the national level. And also we can have some ranges. So what we do with all this information is quite impossible to pull the data, because the data will be completely different. For one will be yes, for other moderate, for other a number, and for other another number in another range. So first we need to standardize, and this is what we are doing, data standardization of the definition. So, and how we do this? We are not going to create new definitions. We need to be based on international recommendations. So, for instance, anemia, according to the World Health Organization, is blood hemoglobin concentration less than this in this unit or this unit in males and less than this in females. So we understand that we also need to include variable sex. And then for the units. So which units we put at the European level? Again, we need to be based on the international recommendations, and there are international recommendations for units in the lab. So then now we know how to define anemia, how to gather the information, the units, and if we want to put some ranges, we also need to agree on this based on a recommendation. And for this, you need to do literature review, and also sometimes, many times, consensus between the expert panel, because not always there are recommendations, especially for some of the elements in ultra-rare diseases. But this is the first step. I think that with this, more or less, this is then clear for us as humans. But what happens about the machines? No, as Lori said, we have some technical also scientists, and also we need to pull the data. What happened at the level of machines? When we want to put all the data in a European repository, first, this is another key concept. We have two possibilities. We can put all the data in a central registry, or we can have what we call federated registries. And what is the difference? So if we have, imagine that the question is at the European level, we want to know how many blue balloons we have in Europe. We have already defined what is a blue balloon. Okay? Blue balloon, we are already defined this. But then now we want to know how many we have at the European level. If we have a centralized registry, what we do from the national registries is to send a copy of our balloons to the centralized one. So we send a copy, and then at the central level, we count how many balloons we have in Europe. In a federated registry, we don't send our balloons to the centralized. What we do is to count them at the national or regional at the level of the registry. So we all count, and then we send the result of our count to the centralized platform, and the centralized platform to account of the count. This is very easy here in this example, but I want you to know that these are the two types of models, but this is very easy for a simple count. For a complex analysis, still the centralized is better quality, but we are working on improving federated models. In any case, we need technical solutions, scientists, automatic data transfer. One of the problems of the registry is the data entry. So we are working on some automatic data transfer from existing registries to central registry. Interoperability platforms, because we need also to exchange all the data, and the platform needs to understand where is each data and where they have to put the data. And these federated platforms that need to improve and improve in order to be at the same level of quality in the results as the centralized platform, that are still the gold standard. And for doing all this, we need coding systems. And if you think that codes are like more standardized, well, yes, but again, we have many codifications. So for instance, for a disorder, for the definition of the disease, beta thalassaemia, we have codes of the International Classification of Diseases, different versions. We have the Orphanet classification for rare diseases, another code. We have the OMIM classification for inheritance disorders, a different code. SNOMED, nomenclature of medicine and clinical terms, another code. And of course, not all the registries include the same code. Actually, most of the registries do not include any code. So it's impossible to do any interoperability. But for those that are implementing codes, not all of them implement the same code. Then we have phenotypes, again, human phenotype ontology. For instance, a phenotype, a symptom would be anemia, with more than 44 codes for different definitions of different types of anemia, and similar for SNOMED with 41 definitions, codes, and also for genes. This is to show you that also for codification, there is many standards, ontologies, and we need to agree on some of them. And to put all this together, we need the interoperability platforms. And these platforms are the ones that are having all these codes, understanding what we mean, and putting the information in different places. There are two main models, just to know that there exist these two main models, FIRE and OMOP. And of course, not all the hospitals use the same one. So it would be with this more clear for us, clear for machines, or more or less, no? Because we have many challenges ahead. But this would be the work to be done for really interoperability of the registries and to put the data together for having this comparable data. What we have done so far, the part of definitions. Okay, if you remember from the beginning, the European Commission already gave us 16 elements that are common for any registry of rare diseases, with birth, sex, diagnosis, survival. And then what we have worked with our experts during the last months was to define common elements in rare hematological disorders. For instance, hematological stem cell transplant, blood transfusion, and some parameters within blood transfusion, the participation in clinical trials, all the laboratory tests that are important in hematology, splenomegaly, treatments, chelation, also some other for classifying severity. In total, 66 elements, more than the 16. So from the 16, we have expanded our data set with 66 extra elements in which we have worked on the definition of the element, the question that we want to answer, how we gather the variable, so the type of answer for the element, definitions based on standard recommendations guidelines, and codifications, and the specific code to be used for each parameter, starting with this reusable. So if we are now able to have interoperable registries, we have our platform. It is a centralized one, because as I told you before, it's still the standard, the gold standard, but we are working on federated solutions. But this is also important because in order to understand if the federated solution is good enough, we need to compare with the centralized one and then to advance on these solutions. But ours is a centralized. We have our ENROL platform with all the description codes, with the spider implementation, encryptation for security, access control in this accessible visualization, and then some standards to transfer the data to third parties and to link with the European Union Rare Disease platform. This is the last step for reusable. But as you can imagine, now we have the legal and the ethics issues. And for this, we have established a governance, and then the ePAGs were really very active on working with us on this. And Loris can explain the work that we have done together.
Yes, thanks, Ma. Of course, as everybody can imagine, working on to implement this kind of platform, and with all the problems we have to face, one more of this problem is to take decision about the governance, because all this environment should be governed. And so at the end of the day, we already have seen in previous slide, so the coordinators of EuroBloodNet that are included in the steering committees. The patient's representatives are included in the steering committees and assigned by legal and ethical experts, because we touch very important and sensitive issues for the patients. The pseudonymization, the pseudonym, the data transfer that is very sensitive are protected by the regulation. So we need to be on the safe side of transferring data without breaking the legislation. Of course, in this slide, you can see the agreement that is needed for the data providers. Since the beginning, everything passed through the governance of the network, and the ePAGs belongs to this to the governance. And the third parties, of course, the third parties are those who are requesting access to the data for different reasons, for research, patients association. The patients have the right to ask for accessing data in order to prepare project specific issues. or to support research in some situations. The industry, the policymakers, everybody can need to access data. But for doing this, and if I can, last slide, the next slide, Mar, thank you. And for doing this, we have a legal frame. And in the legal frame that is particularly sensitive for the patients, we have prepared and working hard in the last year for preparing the informed consent in order to state to list some statements that are clear to understand for patients. Of course, we can consider all the plethora of patients. Not all the patients are the same level of understanding, not the same patients are, have the same level of culture. And so we need to be, we need to prepare the informed consent just to be able to reach everyone and to put every patient or families or parents in the position to exactly understand what he or she are signing. This is important. And of course, just to access the data, the people who require this access should, of course, compile a form for guest accessing data. The data access committee review the request according to the regulation, according to the purpose of this access, and patients, of course, are included in the data access committee in order to make this important, to take this important decision, so sort of shared decision with the coordinators, with everybody that is concerning the governance of the registries. This is particularly important for the patients to have this kind of involvement, because often patients are completely unaware when they put a sign on a paper. They are completely unaware of what happened of the data that they are providing in a clinical trials or for accessing something, or for, of course, they trust in the doctors. So if the doctors ask you to sign a paper, you will do. But it's important to be aware that there is a legal frame and the patients keep the rights to be informed correctly for everything. So at the end of the day, this work has been done for implementing this platform, and we are particularly, as group of patients, ePAGs, particularly proud of the work that we have done, and thanks to the coordinator for giving us the floor and room to participate to this work. I don't know, María, if you want to conclude.
Really a pleasure, because really it was very fruitful discussions together with the patients, and I really think that we improved all the documents. So it was really a pleasure and needed to have the final document, Dolores. Okay, yes, and of course, then at the end, what we do is close the circle. So the hospitals or the existing registries use the spider tool. They produce the pseudonym. Then they can share through an agreement, as Loris mentioned, data to ENROL platform. These pseudonymized data, so the direct identifiers, as the name, never is transferred to ENROL. It is in the local level at the hospital. Then ENROL also gives this technical support to the data providers for upgrading, for the interoperability, codification, or even directly the platform. So we have these all these elements in different modules that we have developed. And then once that we have the data, we can answer the questions to the European Union. But we don't share personal data. We share aggregated data that is anonymous. So it is also ENROL have all these safe words that we were mentioning. And then just for the final slide, we said in the beginning, no, that we wanted 200, almost 250 registries. So, and we are not going to create new registries. What we are doing, this is the last slide. We explain until here. So the European Commission, the ENROL platform, the common elements in hematology, but we are working a lot. We are working a lot in the frame of other initiatives with existing registries that were already established before ENROL, before the European reference networks. And we are working in different also research projects, because at the end, this is very important. All what we are doing is to advance on research, to have new treatments, to have better visibility on what is impacting the patients. And for the oncological hub, we are working for creating a new registry on dendritic cell leukemia. This is an ultra-rare disorder, as Loris mentioned before. For some of them, maybe we need to create a new registry. This is new, and we are working with the experts. We are collaborating with Harmony, that probably many of you know. This is for oncology, and we have a collaboration for working on interoperability, and having some level of comparison, not for transferring data, but having some level of comparison. We are then working for oncological. We have also a new one that is called Impact AML for acute myeloid leukemia, and ENROL will be developing the platform at the European level for identifying patients for clinical trials. Then we have Genomed for All and Syntema that are research projects to advance on interoperability platforms, the federated solutions, how to improve all the transfer of the data and analysis of the data. And it is covering both MDS, AML from the oncological side, and sickle cell disease that is included in the Rare Anemia Disorders Registry. And we are also collaborating with the RADIP that was initiated before ENROL, and it's covering any rare anemia in Europe, and it is based also on the collaboration with national registries. So with this, we are also working on the elements for rare anemia. And then we have a new one for von Willebrand that is not a rare, ultra rare, but it's a specific registry for a very concrete algorithm for severity stratification. So there are many experts behind, patient representatives behind, and we are working on better defining elements that are key for having comparable data at the EU level and to advance research. And with them, we are defining new elements for oncology, rare anemias, and bleeding disorders. So this will be some of these elements transferred to ENROL. So step by step, we grow on very collaborative projects at the European level. So that's all. I really want to thank all the participants, the experts, the members of the EuroBloodNet, the ePAGs, the participation of ePAGs, as I said before. It was crucial for better defining all the governance, the reviewing the informed consent, identifying the registries. So Now it will be the time for questions and answers. So I ask you not to be shy and really to make all the questions you want. And also, Loris, if you want to give some thank you message or before starting the question and answer time.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Yeah, I of course join you in thanking you all the participants. I think this series of webinars are particularly important for the patients in order for them to understand the framework in which we are working at EUROBloodNet, the importance also for the patient to be aware of the problems that we have and the rights that the patient have when we speak about health problems that concerns, when decisions are being taken by our health. It's important for the patients to be aware of this decision, to be part of this decision, to discuss, to have tools and knowledge to discuss with your clinicians, with your doctors, in order to take the most appropriate decision for you, for your life, for your expectations, for what you, for how do you intend to live your life in general. So thank you everybody for attending, and you also keep in touch with the EuroBloodNet in order to follow our webinars for the patients, because we have a very extended program for us, and it's important the participation and the return that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Loris. So we'll start with the questions in the chat. Okay, so health registries can be covered with the provisions of GDPR for secondary processing of data. It is indeed permitted for management of health services and protection of public health, especially when pseudonymization is applied. Legislation has been enacted in 2019 in Malta to define such secondary processing, linking to the GDPR provisions and informed consent. Such practices has already been in place across Europe in the case of cancer and congenital anomalies, sharing pseudonymized data with the Joint Research Center, that is the center in charge of the European Union Rare Disease platform. I understand that the Joint Research Center also uses Spider. Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much for this comment. So first thing, yes, the Joint Research Center is the one in charge of the European Union Rare Disease platform. Spider is the pseudonymization tool released by the Joint Research Center. And yes, for the reason in the slide, when we say for sharing data, we need the legal basis, not the informed consent, legal basis. Normally, these legal bases are achieved through the informed consent, but not always. And because the GDPR is the European regulation, but it gives room to each member state to further regulate the sharing of the data at the national level. And this is the same, as you said, for Malta, is the same in Spain, for instance. So in Spain, we have a Spanish legislation that allows us to reuse the data with some, provided that the patient has given an informed consent before, and with the pseudonymization tool, as you say. For the reason it's very important the use of the pseudonymization tool that is GDPR compliant. But we need to see this case per case, country per country. Not in all the countries is like this. I'll give you an example. For instance, for Spain, if now I have my own research program and patients have already given the consent, I can reuse this data for another project in the same line with the same objectives if I have the ethics committee for the new project. And I don't need to ask again the informed consent. However, in France, the same situation, you have to inform the patient, not to have the informed consent, but you have to actively inform the patient. This is what we were saying, at least in the hospital, contributing, because also I have to say that one thing is legislation, another thing, ethics committees. And ethics committees, we have as many as hospitals, and not always we get the same answer for the same situation, even in the same country. So, but you are right. I am very happy of this because it's very linked to this idea that the informed consent is required always, as it's not always. So there are more and more work at the legislation level to do the reuse of the data.
Thank you very much, Mar, for your answer. Also for the presentation to both of you. I didn't have the chance to thank. Was really clear, and I have really appreciated. Thank you very much. So I'm addressing another question in the chat. If Flores do not want to add anything to the previously comment.
No, I of course, Mar was perfect in the explanation. The only problem is that she spoiled one of the answers of the initial question. So anyway.
But the questionnaire was expected to be done in the beginning.
Yeah, of course, of course. We hope that all the participants can learn from this webinar. So it's I see another question in the chat.
Read it.
Miriam is asking if there isn't any official national registry for specific rare diseases, for example, hemoglobinopathies. I think Miriam is a sickle cell patient. What should be done to start one? This is a particular, I think I can initially answer. This is particularly important for the patients to know, because the patients can be proactively involved in stimulating the creation of a registry at national or even at hospital level in case in some situations. But of course, patients should stimulate clinicians to move in the direction of creating registries. I hope that at the end of the 3 webinars, you realize the importance of having registries for many reasons, not only for knowing exactly where the patients are living or how old are they. The importance for clinical research, for implementing clinical trials, for having new treatments. The hemoglobinopathies, since the hemoglobinopathies have been included in the list of rare diseases, the research in the field have been expanded a lot. Before the inclusion at European level in the list of rare diseases, there was no research in thalassaemia or in sickle cell because there was no companies able to invest too much money. With the incentives that the European Commission, that the Europe provides to the company for investigating on rare diseases, this is now possible. And thalassaemia and sickle cell, hemoglobinopathies, and many other rare diseases have now treatments that once were not available. So this is important to know. This is important, the creation of national registries, and the patient should stimulate that. I don't know if Mar wants to add something.
I just to say that, of course, it's all what you say for us is very relevant, because at the end, the patients, you have a lot of power for pushing for this. And from ENROL, we are supporting the creation of new registries. So what we do first is the mapping. We only show, like, of course, some high-level information, but we have a more detailed mapping, so we know for the different group of diseases where there is a registry and where not. And of course, for some disorders, there are, I don't know, maybe there is a registry in 5 countries, but the others has no registry. So we are also supporting the creation when there is no registry in a given country, and in different ways. So, and this is the objective of all this. So it's like 3 things, no? If there is no registry, we support the creation. If there is an already existing registry without standards, codifications, we support the upgrading for interoperability. And then once that are created are interoperable, we support the pooling of the data. So yes, we are supporting. Of course, it's not always easy. It depends on resources, the experts willing to work together. But I say that more and more from the beginning, some years ago, we see that the experts also really see the added value of this, as I show you. So we are working with European Commission projects on artificial intelligence, on MDS, on SQL, on now the new registries. So I'm very positive of what we are doing now with the registries.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are at the closing phase of the on time. Perfect, everything is perfect. I really want to thank again our speaker for this great presentation. I think that now we really have clear what the patient registry is and how they work, how they are structured, the regulation for personal data. And also a big thanks for the audience for being here. And I hope to see all of you to the next webinar. Thank you very much.